So, greetings from Redwood City, where the air today is about as clear as it ever gets, clean as it ever gets, with very light fog rain that's helping refresh everything. And may the gentle fog rain of the Dharma nourish and feed all of us. So, the Buddha had a radical idea for his times. And the radical idea is that it's okay to be happy. And the happiness that he advocated, a happiness which he said people should not fear, but rather practice regularly and experience regularly, it's a radical kind of happiness for our modern world. The radical idea for our modern world, in that it is a happiness which doesn't harm anyone. It's a happiness which doesn't depend on or require anything of other people, and doesn't harm our environment and using natural resources. And it's amazing to have such a clean, harmless form of happiness available to us. However, it's a happiness that is pretty radical, revolutionary for individuals, in that it requires a radical reorientation, a revolution in the mind about where we're oriented. At least for the period of time of meditation, where we center ourselves, what our central values, purpose, orientation is about where to base our life, where to center ourselves. And it's a revolution in the mind which is not necessarily easy to do. But it's a revolution in the mind that, for the time of the meditation at least, turns the attention around, away from the concerns of the world, away from the concerns of the self, away from the past, the future, the stories of our lives. And that turning away maybe is a shedding temporarily, a deep letting go of many of the ways in which we usually think about ourselves, and even the emotions and feelings that we are really focused on, to turn the attention to become receptive to the depths of our being, to be receptive to the upwelling, to allow the possibility for an upwelling of this happiness the Buddha talked about. It's the happiness that comes from being settled, from having some degree of tranquility and peacefulness about just being here. It's happiness that comes from being content for a few moments, for a few minutes, just to be here, in this body, in this time, in this experience here. And not looking forward and outside and concerned with other things and other places, other times. And here is where we can find a happiness that does not cause harm. Here we find a happiness, the Buddha said, is not to be feared. And here we find a happiness that supports the deep insight leading to liberation, leading to the arising of a deep care and compassion for the world. So to take a meditation posture, and for this meditation, perhaps a posture that certainly helps you to be mindful and alert, to really be here, but a posture where you feel comfortable. So if you have some obvious places of discomfort when you meditate, maybe you can somehow adjust your posture so that discomfort is not here. And the idea of closing our eyes in meditation is also represents, it's a little bit symbolic, of letting go for a few minutes the concerns with the outer world, other people, and to allow the attention to become interested in our direct, embodied experience. What experience does your body have of itself? If we really tune in, listen to our body as if you've never listened to it before, to experience the body from the inside out, with a little heightened sensitivity to embodied experience. And turning the attention to the breathing is also symbolic of turning our attention to a way that our body is caring for ourselves, nourishing us, supporting us in being alive and keeping enough oxygen flowing, carbon dioxide leaving, to make this whole system of ours work. And so symbolically we're turning towards a way in which the body is caring for us, supporting us. And then as we exhale, to begin the process of relaxing some of the extra tension in the body. And this is also symbolic of the value of coming home to oneself, to be centered and settled, really here in your experience. Most tension represents concerns and worries, and they're usually not about being here now. As you exhale, maybe relaxing the muscles of your face. Softening and maybe cooling the eyes. If the teeth are touching, it might be nice to let the teeth just fall away from each other slightly, so the jaws can relax a bit. As you exhale, to soften the shoulders. Maybe feeling the weight of the shoulders and releasing them to the pull of gravity. And each time you relax, it's also a relaxing into being more deeply in your body. As you exhale, softening the chest and the rib cage. And as you exhale, to soften the belly. If the belly hangs forward and down and the weight of the belly settles more deeply, it's symbolic of becoming rooted, stable, at this time, at this place here. This is the place for mindfulness. And there might be a global way of first feeling your whole body, maybe together with the global movements of breathing in your body, expansion and contraction. And is there any overall way in which you're holding the body tense, resisting something? Perhaps as you exhale, to relax, let go. And as you relax your body, see if you can, as you exhale, the end of the exhale, let yourself be receptive to the beginning of the inhale. So the inhale, you feel how it just begins by itself. If it's easy enough to soften your breathing, you can. If it's easy enough to let there be a ever so slight pause, a rest at the end of the exhale, then it might be easier to be receptive to the beginning of the inhale. And being receptive to the inhale is symbolic of an overall orientation to be receptive to the experiences of the body. Whatever way the body is feeling and experiencing, to let there be an openness, receptivity. And every time you exhale, see if you can relax more. Maybe different exhales, different places of your body you can release and relax. And then as you sit here relaxing and opening and receiving, is there anything that's pleasant about that? Any feelings of pleasantness or pleasure that's in your body, in your experience? Could be very embodied pleasure, the pleasantness of some part of the breathing cycle. The pleasantness of some aspect of relaxing. The pleasantness of that comes with a kind of receptivity to experience, a contentment to be rooted, centered here. And then as you breathe, perhaps you can also breathe through that pleasure. Maybe it's a subtle feeling of lightness and well-being, even contentment, joy, however small it might be. Let that also be something as you exhale, you let go into. And as you inhale, that you are receptive to. Almost as if the inhale expands the pleasure, radiates it further through the body. Breathing with pleasure, with the pleasantness that's here. And the pleasantness maybe helps you to be more focused on cruising along on your breathing. Just quietly quieting, riding on the in-breaths and out-breaths. Feeling the pleasantness that might be part of your embodied experience. And if it's easy enough, you can make a little half smile, lifting up the corners of your lips a teeny bit, especially if doing so brings you a little bit of joy or delight. And if it does, then let that joy or delight be integrated with your breathing. Support your breathing. Let whatever joy there is, let it grow in the receptivity of embodied awareness. With each inhale and exhale, like a gentle bellows, wind that's blowing. And some of the meditative sense of well-being can be feelings of lightness, and even like feelings of a wind that lightly lifting up a leaf into the air. Or a gentle fountain of water that's maybe moving up in underneath an underwater lake, underwater fountain, spreading its water through the lake. Just here, letting go of thoughts and concerns, letting go into the body experiencing itself. The body experiencing breathing. The body experiencing whatever is pleasant, enjoyable, here and now. And then as we come to the end of this sitting, with whatever degree of settledness you have or well-being that you feel, or whatever memory you have of some qualitatively nice sense of well-being that you've experienced in your life, a well-being and joy that was harmless, didn't require something from the world so much as it was a deep sense of contentment and well-being just to be alive. And to appreciate that this is a human capacity, that all human beings have the capacity to have a deep sense of ease and peace and well-being, and a deep sense of contentment, joy. And how wonderful it would be if that potential that exists could be the experience of all beings, all people. May it be that a human potential for happiness and well-being can be actualized for all people. May it be a wellspring of inspiration to work for the welfare and happiness of all people. May it be that this meditation practice that we have done today, may it inspire us to live without causing harm to the world, and to wish that all beings be free from harm, free from distress, free from fear. May all beings be happy. May all beings be filled with joy. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free. So in this topic of the week, mindfulness of the body, yesterday I pointed out to one of the benefits of mindfulness of the body is a sense of protection and safety. And it's a wellspring of being ethical. It's hard to intentionally hurt other people, harm other people, if one is really centered in one's body, because then one has the has the information, the experience of how that's also harming ourselves. And that there is another way to take care of ourselves, take care of the world, that doesn't require us to harm anyone. Today the emphasis is that the emphasis on mindfulness of the body provides also a means, a way to experience some of the greatest joys and happiness a human being can experience. That it's through being embodied that we release and open up to the wellspring, the reservoir, the capacity to experience embodied joy, embodied happiness. That is really spectacular because of how embodied it is. It feels really full and complete. And it can feel very stable. It's very satisfying because There's a satisfaction in all our muscles and all the marrows of our bone, as opposed to just kind of a mental excitement, a mental joy, a mental happiness that might come more from evaluation or getting what we want or getting praise or something that's exciting for us or interesting. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but to discover the capacity from within. This is what the Buddha said. What was so radical for the Buddha when he taught in ancient India. There were plenty of religious traditions in his time that really mistrusted any kind of embodied physical sense of joy and happiness. They associated with sensual pleasure, which was kind of a trap or attachment. And the Buddha, who understood the trap, the problems of clinging to sensual pleasure, discovered a non-sensual, embodied sense of happiness and well-being that can well up from sitting quietly meditating. In modern world, we might say that as we get concentrated and settled and peaceful, and stress falls away entirely, and the body's very relaxed, and we keep being kind of more concentrated just on the breathing or just on something here, that it releases endorphins or releases some kind of chemicals in our body that bring up a lot of sometimes quite intense sense of joy and happiness. We might say that, but that to me seems very reductionistic and seems like it misses the point of the deep embodied sense of well-being, contentment, satisfaction that can well up in this kind of meditative happiness and joy. That really kind of comes to its own when we have the capacity to have an embodied mindfulness, where there's a receptivity in the body for this to well up. And as I said earlier, that I think it's fairly revolutionary for our modern world that this happiness that the Buddha advocated is happiness that doesn't harm anyone. It doesn't require using a lot of resources, a lot of money to get get pleasant experiences, to do exciting things. It doesn't require receiving praise from anyone or adulation, becoming famous. It doesn't require having power, the pleasure of power some people are addicted to. Many of the normal places people are looking for happiness and well-being so often cause more suffering than they do happiness, not in the short term, sometimes in the long term. And it's not to be critical of those, but to have access to a deeply embodied kind of internal sense of well-being and happiness, some of the greatest kinds of joy and even ecstasy that's possible in meditation, that doesn't require anything outside to be different, doesn't require money and all the other things. It's considered to be harmless for the world around us. And to have that as a wellspring of meaning, of purpose, to understand how deeply satisfying it is, how meaningful it is, how it gives a sense of a life of purpose, and it leads to a life of service. It leads to a life of caring and compassion and freedom. So it's not a selfish happiness, and it can't be selfish because selfishness actually squashes this free-flowing wellspring of joy and delight that comes from the inside. And that's why it's such a revolutionary act for some people to begin experiencing this wellspringing of meditative joy, is because it requires a orientation certainly away from conceit, away from narcissism that some people have, but also away from a self-preoccupation with self and self-identity, but rather a willingness, a receptivity to allow kind of like a life force to well up and move through us, rather than being in the control tower trying to control it or be it or prove it or apologize for oneself or show off oneself or define oneself or justify oneself, to to put all that kind of selfing aside and trust this welling up of this goodness, this peacefulness that's possible here. In talking about this, and also in that guided meditation I did, very aware that this is not really a meditation for someone who's brand new to meditation, and I offer it here partly as a continuity of all these months of offering the 7 a.m. sitting, with the hope that a little bit the continuity, the background of all that we've done so far, creates some kind of foundation that makes this a little bit accessible, what I'm talking about here. It doesn't have to be ecstasy, it doesn't have to be dramatic, but to learn to turn our attention inward and begin to be receptive, to be allowing to be attuned to the feelings of pleasantness, of lightness, of satisfaction, of contentment that might start as little hints, but as we breathe and open and settle more, it becomes bigger and stronger. It does require a mind which is undistracted. It requires a mind that doesn't fill the space of attention with its preoccupation. Because there has to be room in our attention, the attentional field, for this embodied experiences to surface and show themselves. And it's maybe useful to think that our attention only has a certain amount of bandwidth. And if we fill it with thoughts and memories and stories and conversations, it gives very little bandwidth left over for our body. In fact, probably it's like Zoom, where if you have too much bandwidth is being used, something begins to freeze, and you're not really kind of keep going. So so to quiet the mind enough to allow this lived experience. And some of you maybe have had the experience of doing exercise, like going for a really nice walk in some place outside, and maybe in a nice cool day or something, and just feeling the vitality flowing in the body, the blood flowing, the vitality, and it just feels so good to feel the body, all these energies of the body just flowing, and there's a kind of deep satisfaction with those energies flowing. It's kind of like those, it's related to that begins to be released when there's a lot of relaxation and alertness. When we begin really the revolution of recentering ourselves on the lived experience from the inside out as it flows and moves through us. And there's different degrees, different characteristics of this pleasure, this sense of well-being that can well up from the inside. But the reason to talk about it here in Mindfulness of the Body Week is that the more we can be embodied in practice, the more we attune to our body and make a habit and are familiar with the experience of a body, the more benefits that come from it. Certainly if there is pain, which there's oftentimes can be pain and discomfort in the body, there's a way in which mindfulness of the body can be phenomenally supportive for that, can allow us to respect it and find a way through it, and find our peace with it. But also mindfulness of the body really makes room for this meditative joy, the capacity for inner joy and happiness to well up and come forward. So I didn't know about this many years when I first started doing Zen practice, because in Zen meditation, it was actually kind of discouraged or kind of seen as a little distraction to have a meditative joy and happiness as part of practice. And maybe there's an orientation in that tradition sometimes to see that any kind of leaning into it or opening to it as a kind of attachment, a kind of departing from just kind of the more ultimate connection to truth, which maybe sometimes Zen is supposed to emphasize. And so, but then when I was introduced to Vipassana practice, it was then that I began to appreciate that this meditative joy and happiness that can well up, not only is it allowable, but it actually begins opening the door for greater and greater letting go. And as you open up more and more and get more and more settled in the present moment, wonderfully, the joy fades away. And then with the joy fading away, there's a deeper, sublime form of happiness, embodied, deep, satisfying feeling that wells up. And then with time, that happiness fades away. And rather than it being a loss, it's really a fantastic gain, because it's very deeper, more satisfying feeling of peace, tranquility, equanimity. It kind of replaces it. And to be so at home, so feeling so not in conflict, so not challenged by anything, but have this beautiful feeling of peace kind of flowing in here. That also at some point fades away. And it fades away into a deep letting go, deep release. And that deep release then allows us to touch, tactile touching of freedom, of liberation. So this joy and happiness that the Buddha emphasized is not meant to be an end to itself, so it is not to be attached to it, but certainly to allow for it, to be receptive to it, to allow it to grow and develop, so that it can keep morphing and transforming as the practice deepens into happiness and peace and then freedom. So mindfulness of the body. May your body be your friend. May you feel that your body is here really to support you and that it has these treasures inside that if you take the time and give some of your attentional bandwidth to, you can allow this deep healing and deep freeing of these positive emotions and feelings from deep within. So, thank you very much, and we'll continue tomorrow.